The first time I met Donna Newell, she marched up my gravel driveway like she owned the mountain. Her wedge heels sank into the dirt, her oversized sunglasses reflected the pine trees, and her voice, oh man, that voice sounded like someone snapping bubblegum next to your ear. "You can't just have a cabin up here," she said, arms crossed like she was ready to throw me off my own land. "This is a private community under HOA regulation. You'll need to sell these kinds of rustic structures lower our property values." I leaned against the porch rail, coffee in hand, wearing my usual flannel and jeans. I'd been living up here for years, away from the city noise, just enjoying the quiet. Well, until Donna and her little HOA decided to push their jurisdiction where it didn't belong. "My name's Wade Buckner," I said, "and this rustic structure, it was built by my grandfather in 1962. It's been here longer than your HOA. Donna's nose scrunched like she'd smelled something bad. "We recently expanded the HOA boundaries. This entire hill is now part of Oak Ridge View Estates. That includes your little cabin." I blinked once. "You expanded the HOA to include my land," she nodded proudly like she'd just solved world hunger. "And as HOA president, I'm giving you 90 days to sell and vacate. We're planning a new luxury retreat center in this zone." That's when I laughed. I couldn't help it, she bristled. "Excuse me? You really should have done your homework," I said, walking down the steps toward her. "You see, Donna, I don't just own this cabin. I own the entire Oak Ridge," she blinked. "That's impossible." I pulled out my phone and tapped open the county parcel map. "See these 37 parcels, including your house? I bought them at auction 12 years ago. The HOA has been leasing access roads and easements from me ever since. You've been using my land to host your little tea parties and regulation patrols." Donna's face turned the color of expired yogurt. "That can't be legal." "It's very legal," I said. "And you just tried to illegally annex land you don't own." She turned red. "You'll regret this. I'll take this to the board." "Do that," I said. "Just know your board meetings have been held in a clubhouse built on my soil." She stormed off, heels clicking on the dirt like angry castanets. I watched her go, knowing full well she'd be back and that she'd come with backup. What Donna didn't realize yet was that I'd been documenting every shady HOA move made up here for over a year, including every time she used HOA funds to upgrade her own patio or fine residents without proper votes. She wanted a war. She was standing on the battlefield I owned. 3 days after Donna's surprise visit, I got a letter in a gold-trimmed envelope shoved into my mailbox. No postage, no return address. Classic HOA move. Inside was a single-page notice written in stiff legal language, claiming my cabin violated architectural uniformity standards and was subject to immediate citation. There was even a fake fine $500 for non-compliant exterior facade. I raised my eyebrows. My property wasn't under their jurisdiction, and I knew for a fact they didn't have the authority to issue a single citation up here. But that wasn't the part that got me. What got me was the forged county seal at the bottom. I didn't waste time. I drove straight to the county recorder's office, where the clerk, Marla, who's known me since I was a kid, took one look at the letter and rolled her eyes so hard I thought I'd have to catch them. "Wade," she said, holding the letter like it had been dipped in something foul, "this isn't even a good forgery. The seal's from a version we stopped using 8 years ago, and the signature, that's not even close to the current zoning commissioner's." "Would this qualify as fraud?" I asked. Marla didn't answer. She just nodded and started making copies. By the time I left, I had a full certified report from the county verifying the letter's illegitimacy. I also had a voicemail waiting on my phone from a guy calling himself Director of Compliance with the Oak Ridge HOA, asking me to schedule a voluntary review meeting. His voice sounded like someone trying to sound polite while clenching their teeth. I didn't call back. Instead, I spent the next 2 days reviewing easement contracts and utility agreements. Years ago, when I bought up the surrounding parcels, I'd negotiated quiet but binding access rights to the only 2 roads leading into Oak Ridge View Estates. The HOA paid a flat annual rate for road maintenance, and they were behind on payment by almost 9 months. I double-checked the terms. Non-payment past 6 months gave me full legal right to restrict entry, so I did. That Saturday morning, I pulled my work truck across the north access road and chained the gate shut. The south road had a rusted cattle gate which I padlocked and posted with a sign, "Private property, unpaid access, no trespassing." By noon, my phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Neighbors I'd never met were calling, confused and irritated. Some were polite, some weren't. A few offered to come talk in person, which I welcomed. I figured it was time folks around here knew what was really happening. Around 4 in the afternoon, 2 residents showed up: an older man named Curtis and a woman named Lee. They parked just outside the gate and walked the rest of the way up with a 6-pack of local beer and a folder full of HOA newsletters. "I told my husband something fishy was going on," Lee said, handing me the folder. "They've been jacking up dues every quarter. Said it was for community improvements, but all we've seen are new lights outside Donna's house and a marble bench with her name carved into it." Curtis took a long pull from his drink. "And now we're getting letters saying we have to repaint our houses in approved tones. She approved beige off beige and something called subtle sand." I flipped through the newsletters. They were careful, nothing outright illegal in the language, but the pattern was clear. Donna had slowly consolidated control by rewriting bylaws during sparsely attended meetings and appointing her friends to key positions. The real kicker was a scanned copy of an emergency budget amendment from 3 months back allocating $15,000 for executive housing upgrades. "Let me guess," I said. "Her patio?" "And her hot tub," Lee added. "She said it was necessary for community morale." That's when I knew I had more than just a nuisance on my hands. This wasn't just about power, it was about money. And worse, embezzlement. I spent the next week gathering paperwork. Bank statements from residents who'd paid fines with no receipts. Photographs of construction projects on Donna's property that clearly exceeded her own code restrictions. I even found a drone video someone had taken last spring that showed a delivery truck dropping off granite countertops at her house on the same day. She claimed HOA funds were used to fix a community drainage issue. Then came the final piece. An anonymous email from someone inside the HOA board. It included a PDF of a private meeting's minutes that had never been published. In it, Donna discussed strategic expansion of jurisdiction and eliminating problematic parcels. My cabin was listed by name. I brought everything to the sheriff's department in town. The deputy on duty, Hernandez, had known Donna since high school. "Wouldn't surprise me," he said, flipping through the evidence. "She's been pulling strings since she was student council president, but this is felony territory." He forwarded the case to the county prosecutor. By the following Tuesday, subpoenas were issued for HOA financial records, and a formal investigation was opened. That same night, a marked cruiser rolled past Donna's house. The next morning, she was on my property again, this time without heels. She wore a windbreaker, sneakers, and the tightest smile I'd ever seen. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," she said, glancing around like someone expecting cameras. "I didn't realize forgery and fraud were your idea of a first impression." She ignored that. "We'd like to offer you a settlement. The board is prepared to offer double market value for your property, no questions asked." I didn't answer. I just walked to my truck, opened the bed, and pulled out a file box full of documentation. I handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked, flipping open the lid. "Copies," I said. "Of everything I gave the sheriff's department, that forensic accountant. He's going to have a field day with your emergency upgrades." Donna's hands trembled as she closed the box. "I suggest you lawyer up," I said. "And maybe resign. That marble bench won't look so charming in mugshots." She turned without another word. This time she didn't walk, she ran. Hours later, word spread that an emergency HOA board meeting had been called, but this one wasn't held at the clubhouse. It was held in a resident's garage because the county had placed a hold on all HOA-controlled buildings pending the investigation. That night, over 24 residents showed up at my gate, not angry, not accusing, just tired and ready to know the truth, so I told them. And for the first time in years, people started asking real questions. The garage was packed wall to wall with folding chairs, mismatched lamps, and residents who looked like they'd just come back from war. Not the bloody kind, more like a battle of patience and paperwork. The owner of the garage, a wiry retired plumber named Denny, had moved his lawnmower and tool racks aside to make room. A whiteboard leaned against a workbench with HOA emergency session scribbled in dry erase marker. I didn't sit. I stood near the back with my arms crossed while residents took turns sharing what they knew. For the first time, people were talking openly, no whispers, no worry about retaliation. A woman named Janine revealed Donna had once threatened to fine her for having excessive wind chimes, which she'd installed after her mother passed. A man with grease under his nails said his garage had been cited for non-compliant flooring even though it had concrete, just like everyone else's. Then Lee stood. Donna's been telling us all that our dues are going toward road paving and community upgrades, but Wade here owns the roads, and we haven't seen a single invoice or quote from a contractor in 2 years. Heads turned toward me. I let the silence stretch before stepping forward. I've filed for a temporary injunction against the HOA until the county concludes its investigation, I said. Based on what I gave them, they're looking into at least 3 felony charges, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to ask a question. Do you want to rebuild this community yourselves? Curtis raised a hand without waiting. What would that even look like? You form a residents' committee, not an HOA, strictly voluntary. You decide what's worth funding, if anything. And without bylaws giving any one person unchecked power. A younger guy near the front, maybe in his late 20s, said, "And what if Donna tries to shut it down? She won't have the authority. She's being audited." And the county's seized her voting rights within the HOA until the review is complete. There was a moment, just a breath's worth, where you could feel the tide turn. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet realization that people weren't powerless anymore. The next morning, Donna's house was swarming with men in navy jackets. Federal ones, not sheriff's deputies. The kind that operate out of nondescript buildings and don't wear name badges. Later, I'd learned that one of the residents had tipped off the IRS after noticing Donna submitted HOA funds under a tax-exempt nonprofit, even though she'd funneled a portion into a side business listed under her son's name. That son, by the way, lived in Reno and had never set foot in Oak Ridge. I was stacking firewood when the unmarked SUV pulled up to my cabin. A woman in a brown suit stepped out and introduced herself as Agent Carter with the state's Public Integrity Unit. Her tone wasn't friendly, but it wasn't hostile either, more like someone who'd seen too many schemes and wasn't surprised by anything anymore. "We've got enough to initiate a racketeering investigation," she said, flipping open a binder. "You're listed as a primary witness in 2 affidavits. One from the county zoning department, the other from a former HOA treasurer, Stephanie Wells. You know her. Red hair, always wore a scarf," I asked. "That's her. She's giving a deposition this week." Apparently, she didn't know Donna had opened a second operating account until she was asked to sign off on a withdrawal she'd never authorized. I nodded. "What do you need from me?" "For starters, your easement contracts, and any correspondence you've had with the HOA board in the past 5 years. Even if it's just emails about road access or snow plowing." She paused. "And the original survey maps, if you've got them." I went into the cabin and came out with a lockbox. "Kept everything. My lawyers already scanned the backups." She took the box, gave me a nod, and left without another word. By the end of the week, Donna's name had been scrubbed from the HOA website. The page just said Interim Leadership Committee pending. Word spread that she'd been placed under house arrest and was wearing an ankle monitor. At night, I could see the faint blue pulse of it when she stepped outside to get her mail. But that wasn't the end. One afternoon, Curtis knocked on my door holding a manila folder. "You need to see this." Inside were scanned copies of building permits, fake ones. They claimed to be from the county, authorizing future development of recreational facilities. They had my parcel numbers on them, not just the cabin but 6 of the adjacent lots I used for timber and wildlife conservation. The signatures had been forged, but they weren't Donna's. "They're from someone named Chandler Watts," Curtis said. "He's listed as HOA legal counsel, but get this, he's not licensed to practice in this state." I did some digging. Chandler Watts was a disbarred attorney from Nevada who'd been sued twice for running shell corporations. Donna had listed him as external legal advisor, and he'd drafted the expansion of HOA boundaries that supposedly included my land. It was a paper scam, an attempt to create legal confusion long enough to push me out and clear the way for their luxury retreat. Lee brought over a thumb drive she'd found in a drawer at the clubhouse after the county froze HOA operations. On it were meeting recordings, not just minutes, but full audio files. Most of them were boring, but one from 6 months ago caught my attention. Donna's voice came through clearly. "We can push the old guy off the ridge if we time it right. He's sitting on $3 million in potential development. If we claim he's violating community standards, we can force his hand." Another voice male replied, "What if he fights it?" "He won't. He's a hermit. No one listens to him." I played it twice, then saved a copy. The state prosecutor's office had been unsure whether they could prove intent to defraud. That recording changed everything. By the time I turned it over, Donna was no longer under house arrest. She was in county lockup, awaiting trial. The charges now included wire fraud, conspiracy, and falsifying public documents. Chandler Watts was picked up in Reno and extradited 2 days later. Federal agents had discovered over a dozen shell companies tied to HOA transactions, including one that had purchased furniture for Donna's lake house in Idaho. With the HOA dissolved by court order, the residents of Oak Ridge voted to form a voluntary collective. No fines, no mandatory dues. Just a shared maintenance fund for the roads and snowplows, and a rotating committee to manage it. I agreed to lease the access roads long-term for $1 a year, with the condition that no future group could ever claim jurisdiction over my land again. At the first community barbecue held in Denny's yard, people laughed for the first time in months. Someone brought a karaoke machine. Curtis murdered a rendition of American Pie. And when Lee handed me a paper plate stacked with ribs, she said, "You didn't just save your cabin. You saved all of us." I didn't say anything, just nodded and looked out over the ridge where the sun was dipping behind the trees. For the first time in a long while, the mountain felt like it was breathing easy again. The morning after the barbecue, I found a manila envelope duct taped to my cabin's front door. No return address, no name, just a single word scrawled across it in black marker: backup. Inside were printed screenshots, dozens of them. Some from email threads, others from what looked like security footage. I recognized the interior of the Oak Ridge clubhouse in several shots. One frame showed Donna standing with a man in a gray windbreaker, pointing at a map on the wall. In another, she was holding a check made out to a name I didn't recognize but drawn from the HOA's account. The emails were worse. They detailed a full scheme to pressure 4 homeowners into defaulting on their dues, then use those delinquencies as grounds to seize their homes under a clause buried in the association's bylaws. The homes would then be reclaimed as community property, sold under the guise of redevelopment, and the profits funneled through a shell company registered out of state. The name on that company matched the one on the check in the photo. I drove to the sheriff's office with the folder under my arm. Deputy Hernandez met me at the front desk. He didn't ask questions, didn't smile, He just took one look at the evidence and motioned toward the back hallway. An hour later, I was sitting with someone from the State Attorney General's Financial Crimes Division, a woman named Willa Dent. She wore a navy blazer and carried a notepad that never stopped moving. "Did you take these photos?" she asked. "No, they were left anonymously." But I recognize the clubhouse interior, and the woman in most of them is Donna Newell. She tapped her pen once. The check in that image was cashed at a small bank in Idaho, same town where she owns that lake house. That's interstate wire fraud if we can confirm the funds originated from HOA accounts. They did. I've got the original ledgers from the treasurer on file at home. Willa didn't look surprised. We've just received a sealed tip from a former board member. Apparently, the shell company has 5 properties under its name, all bought within the last year, all linked to HOA redevelopment projects. She didn't need to say it, I already knew. "Let me guess," I said. "None of those projects ever happened, correct?" And 3 of the properties were resold within 60 days, at a profit. I leaned forward. "How fast can you freeze her assets?" "Already in progress," she said. "We're also preparing a multi-jurisdictional indictment. If this leads where I think it does, we're looking at conspiracy to defraud, money laundering, and organized real estate fraud." That night, a black SUV idled outside Donna's house for over an hour, engine running. No one went in, no one came out. But the next morning, she was gone. News spread fast. A neighbor spotted her car abandoned at a rest stop 2 towns over. Her phone was turned off. Her house was empty. The county sheriff issued a warrant for failure to appear after she missed a court date related to the forged permits. Once the state charges were filed, she was officially classified a fugitive. But she hadn't gone far. 2 weeks later, a ranger spotted her hiking near the Northern Ridge trailhead, trying to cross into the next county on foot. She was taken into custody without incident, wearing a rain poncho and carrying a backpack full of cash, protein bars, and a fake driver's license under the name Denise Howell. The arrest made the local news, then the state news, then national. Turns out, a suburban HOA president running a real estate racket across 4 counties made for good headlines. Especially when her mugshot ran next to a photo of the marble bench she'd installed with community funds. But the real justice came later. In court, she faced 22 counts including real estate fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and obstruction. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming: emails, surveillance, testimony from 4 former board members. And the kicker, a video recording recovered from the clubhouse's security system, showing Donna rehearsing her statements for a community emergency meeting where she planned to announce the fabricated bankruptcies of 3 residents, all as a cover to seize their homes. The jury deliberated for less than a day, guilty, on all counts. She was sentenced to 19 years in state prison with no chance of parole for at least 12. The judge called it an egregious abuse of civic trust carried out under the false banner of neighborhood stewardship. The state seized her assets. The fake company was dissolved. The lake house went up for auction. After the trial, the residents of Oak Ridge held a vote to permanently dissolve the HOA. The county approved the motion unanimously. The bylaws were shredded. The clubhouse was repurposed into a community center, owned jointly by the residents and managed by volunteers. I kept my distance from the spotlight, but folks still came by every so often, dropping off pies, offering firewood, even just to chat. One evening, Lee brought a rusted mailbox with a fresh coat of paint and the words "Community Drop Box" stenciled on it. "We figured it should live here," she said. "You were the one who listened." I mounted it on the fence post at the edge of my drive. Over time, people began leaving notes, updates about weather, someone needing a ride to town, or a kid who lost their dog. Nothing official. Just a way for people to stay connected. The ridge was quiet again. Not silent, but peaceful. No more fines, no more threats, just neighbors looking out for each other. One afternoon, I stood on the porch, watching two kids on bikes race down the trail that used to be patrolled by Donna's self-appointed compliance officer. They laughed the whole way down, dust kicking up behind them like smoke. Curtis pulled up in his old pickup, engine rattling. He got out with a thermos in one hand and a newspaper in the other. "You see this?" he asked, handing me the front page. It showed Donna being transferred to a state penitentiary. The headline read, "From HOA president to prisoner, the fall of a neighborhood tyrant." I handed it back. "Justice is funny," I said. "It takes its time, but when it lands, it doesn't miss." Curtis nodded. "You ever think about running for mayor or something?" "Not a chance," I said. "I like my porch too much." Later that week, a city planner came by to survey the outer parcels. She was young, sharp, and respectful, asked if I'd ever consider selling for conservation purposes. I told her maybe someday, but for now the land stays as it is. She smiled. "I wish more places had folks like you keeping watch." I didn't say anything, just nodded and walked her back to her car. The mountain stayed quiet that night. The wind rustled the trees without resistance. And for the first time in years, there wasn't a single sign posted anywhere telling people what they couldn't do. Just open sky, honest ground, and a neighborhood that had finally remembered what it meant to be one.